stuff, and when people just chit-chatted, and you could pick up this whole Muslim-Hindu divide, and you could pick it up. It's just awful.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I think this government has increased it. The
Sorry.
BJP.
Cedric. Okay. Who's the possible successor to Arafat? Is there someone being groomed? Anyone?
Yeah, there's somebody being groomed, but he's not a successor. I mean, in the sense that he will be able to carry on. He won't. He has no popularity. No, I mean, Arafat's like...
Arafat, yeah.
It's not like Mandela. Don't get the wrong idea. He isn't. But he's a kind of unique figure. And he is unfortunately, unlike your situation here, he has made a point of surrounding himself with mediocrities who will give him no trouble. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's, the pattern in the Arab world is like that. Hosni Mubarak, the Egyptian president, there's no vice president.
Yeah. But I mean, that's mind-blowing stuff about Barak.
Oh, it's incredible.
Cousin.
No, he's a killer. He's a killer. He's a killer. And who's the man behind the policy of using helicopters to hit houses?
Yeah.
It's Barak.
Because, people always compare Sharon and they portray Barak as
They're the same.
As
They're
the
the same.
progressive
I mean, Barak
peacemaker.
speaks a little differently, but he and Sharon are great buddies. I mean, Sharon wanted him in his government. Oh, please. The mythology.
Yeah,
is
Cedric, no, we're ready. We can kick off as soon as you just give me a cue.
Can I just have a quick
Yeah,
drink?
Jyoti. Okay.
What's happened to Jyoti? Where is she?
Okay. Thanks. They're chatting to me in my ear, yeah.
Stand by everyone for recording. Thank you.
Talk to you.
You can talk to me.
Yes.
Now, could you unbutton your jacket, please?
Unbutton it.
Yeah. Is that better, or
No, I prefer it.
are you okay?
Okay.
Whatever it's,
Why? Look.
you prefer it.
No,
It
no,
just
whatever.
crinkled a bit on top here
It's
when
okay,
you're
it's
sitting.
okay.
Okay.
We'll do it whatever.
Is that okay? That looks quite neat, actually. That's good.
No, this is what is it? A news program?
Yeah, we have a 1-hour news program Monday to Thursday.
What time is it broadcast?
Between 7 and 8
A.M.
PM.
9
PM. And it's fairly new. It's kicked off about, we're in our third week now.
Huh?
And
So you have
traditionally-
discussion in it as well.
Yeah, we're having more and more live discussions.
That's right.
And
But you have a bulletin of news also.
we do.
Yeah.
What we do, we have, it's a kind of mix of hard news, sport, entertainment, and we traditionally had a half-an-hour bulletin in the past.
That's good. And you are the anchorman.
Yes, I do the Monday to Thursday slot. Yeah, sure. Okay. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. Could you explain to us why do ordinary Palestinians appear to be resisting the peace process?
Well, they're not resisting the peace process as such. What they're resisting is the military occupation, which has gone on sort of despite the peace process and as part of it since 1993. Now, what most people are not aware of, that the actual documents that were signed by the PLO or Arafat and the Israelis say nothing about ending occupation, and that's one of the reasons most people opposed the peace process, because neither was occupation slated to end. Troops are there. The Israelis control now, I'd say, of the West Bank roughly 65%, and they control about 40% of Gaza. They're still there, and they have settlements, and they have roads for the settlers that go across Palestinian territories, and they continue to take land. So that's what Palestinians are resisting, not the peace process, but rather that aspect of the peace process which allows Israelis to continue the military occupation, which has now gone on since 1967. So it's...
Does Yasser Arafat have the mandate to negotiate with the Israelis?
It's very complicated because, when you're a population under occupation, it's very difficult to know because you don't have, in a sense, free elections since the Israelis are in control. He certainly has did have the popular mandate and assumed it in the early 90s when the peace process began. And he's certainly the most popular Palestinian, the most visible. He's an international figure, a friend of Nelson Mandela, and so on and so forth. However, I think that for two reasons, his mandate has slowly withered away, and I don't think he has one now. The first reason being the occupation which has gone on. So people say, well, if we're negotiating for peace, how are these people still destroying our houses, the Israelis? How are their troops still holding? They're still holding several thousand prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, are in Israeli jails. I mean, you can't have a peace process and have these people still picked up and put down. They're conducting assassinations they've killed already 20 since the Intifada began. So all of that's part of, consider the peace process, says, well, look at how could you call this peace? So that's become unpopular. And second, and unfortunately, since he came back in 1994 and established something called the Palestinian Authority, it is in effect a dictatorial regime. Dissent is punished immediately. There's a tremendous amount of corruption. There is no public sector in the economy. It's all owned by individuals close to him who have monopolies for oil, for cement, for paper, for building materials, etc. So the corruption and the cruelty and the absence of democracy have made him unpopular. And I think a lot of what's going on now, the Intifada, is directed at his rule. So in that sense, the mandate is sort of questionable, I think.
Now, you've often compared the Palestinian situation to South Africa.
Yes.
You refer to Gaza and the West Bank as Bantustans. How bad is the situation really there?
Right now, it is beyond description. I don't think South Africans who lived in apartheid have any idea of how bad this is. You had pass laws here. There, to get from one village to another now, this is part of the collective punishment of the Israelis. Villages that are 5 miles apart are cut off from each other by roadblocks, by Israeli barricades, so that you cannot travel. For example, no Palestinian can go to Jerusalem. That's forbidden. You cannot travel between the West Bank and Gaza because that means going through Israeli territory, which is closed off. To go between Ramallah and Nablus, two of the main northern West Bank towns, is almost impossible because they cut the roads off. So it's very bad in that respect. The economy is destroyed. They're losing, on an average, the Palestinian economy is losing $8 million a day because people are not allowed to go to the work. Imports and exports are completely forbidden, and the only way you can import and export is through Israel. You can't do it, say, with Jordan, you can't do it with Egypt, and that's part of the peace process. It made the Palestinian economy completely dominated by Israel. And third, we have fascistic settlers, Israeli settlers on the West Bank and Gaza, who go around shooting up Palestinians, destroying Palestinian orchards, olive tree groves, houses. I mean, these people are protected by the army. I'll give you an example. One of the largest West Bank towns, Arab towns, is Hebron. That has a population of about 120,000 Arabs. And yet, 20% of the town is controlled by 350 settlers, protected by the army. They can go on rampages, and with the army behind them, they can do anything they want. All of this whole system, is based on a principle of religion, that if you're a Jew, you have rights that Arabs don't have, non-Jews. It's a total apartheid, and that's what we're fighting against. Our struggle is not only for liberation from occupation and the restitution of our rights, our right to return, for example, but also the end of racial and religious discrimination, which has crippled us as a people and has been there for over 50 years.
Why do you think the media is not focusing on the appalling conditions in Gaza and the West Bank? You're not seeing much in any of the reports coming out of the region.
Not at all. In fact, most of the reports, I did a survey of a 3-week period during the Intifada, this last one in October. And I counted 100 reports in newspapers and on television. Only 4 mentioned the fact that these were occupied territories, so that most viewers think, they keep talking about Palestinian violence. Well, I mean, it's the wrong word when you use violence, when you use the word violence to describe rock throwing, because Palestinians are unarmed, basically, right? The Israelis have tanks, they've been using helicopters, they've been using missiles, they've been using mortars, firing to maim and kill. So that as a result, there are 400 Palestinians who are killed. There are 11,000 injuries and 30 or 40 Israeli injuries and deaths. I mean, the disproportion is completely misreported or concealed by the media, which is lazy, and in general in the United States favors Israel, very Zionist in that respect. So you get a very distorted picture. And above all, there's no historical perspective. People don't understand why the Palestinians are fighting. So they've gotten to the view, they think that all Palestinians are terrorists. And notice that when Israeli spokesmen are put on, they always refer to Palestinian resistance as terrorism, which is the case in South Africa here for the ANC. Everything they did was terrorism. But it's resistance, and according to the United Nations, people are allowed to resist by any means possible military occupation, and that's the situation.
Could you expand a bit more on America's role in its support of Israel?
I mean, it is true. First of all, Israel has received more military and economic and political aid from the United States since it was established than any other state, not just in modern history, in all history. I've calculated, and others have done the same thing, that since 1967, Israel has received at least $150 billion in outright dollar aid, plus total strategic cooperation, total military aid, support in the United Nations, so that whatever Israel does against the United Nations resolutions, against Geneva Conventions, etc., the United States vetoes. So it is in effect what allows Israel to do what it does today. But unfortunately, that is the pattern of U.S. Foreign relations, that the U.S. always supports oppressive regimes. I mean, for many years, the apartheid regime was supported by the United States, because they thought that's where our interests are, they're not with liberation. And the same is true there. Plus the fact that in America we have a very powerful, certainly I think the most powerful, pro-Israel lobby. It's considered to be the most powerful lobby of any interest in the United States. So that senators can be brought, we have 100 senators, 2 from each of the 50 states, within a matter of hours. Something like 98 of them can be brought around to sign a statement also in support of Israel. So I think it's true, as somebody said, that the Congress is Israeli-occupied territory too. I mean, they do whatever Israel wants.
What about support for the Palestinians? How much aid are they getting from the Arab world, for example?
That's an even worse story. At the recent Arab summit, the extraordinary summit called in support of the Intifada, they pledged $1 billion in aid. Now, to the best of my knowledge, not a single cent of that has appeared. There are several reasons for that. The Arab regimes, I should say, because they are basically repressive and unpopular regimes, basically are not really interested in the plight of the Palestinians. They know that it's a very popular issue in the Arab world. I mean, it is the issue of the Arab world, Palestinians, right? So they give lip service to it, but in effect they do what the US says. They need the support of the United States. That's certainly true of the Gulf states, it's certainly true of Egypt, it's certainly true of the others, Jordan, and so on. The second reason is that I think they're worried that if they give too much money to the Palestinians, it'll go to Arafat's regime, which is, I mean, part of the structure of that regime is that whatever money comes in has to go to the Palestinian Authority, which means Arafat. He controls the entire budget of the territories, and so there's that fear. However, there's an interesting fact, which maybe not many people know. The only Arab leader, and I totally oppose him, by the way, the only Arab leader who's giving money to Palestinians today is Saddam Hussein. For every martyr, for every family that has somebody killed in the Intifada, killed by the Israelis, he gives $10,000 in cash. And that's really the only money that's coming in. The rest, people are starving, the schools are closed, people can't move around, and the future is very, very bleak. That's why they're out in the streets. There's no alternative. You either sit at home and just get destroyed, or you go out and you demonstrate and resist. And I think that's what people have chosen.
I'd like to change focus slightly here. The issue of Jerusalem. Jerusalem has become a stumbling block for peace. Can a compromise be reached on the whole issue of Jerusalem?
Well, I think it can be reached. I think, the Israeli position is ridiculous. They say that it's been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years. That's a complete lie. I mean, first of all, Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslims in the 7th century, and since that time it's been a Muslim city. Of course, it's a Christian city as well. And intermittently, there have been Jews in it, but it certainly was never dominated by Jews, not since the time of David, and that for a short period of time. We're talking about 100 years. In the 10,000-year-old history of Jerusalem, that's not a very long time. So they've created this completely ridiculous myth, negating the importance of Jerusalem to both Islam and Christianity, and saying it's ours. We conquered it, therefore it's ours. No compromise can be based on that position. My feeling is that Jerusalem has to become an international city, recognized as the city where the three monotheistic faiths consider it as very important to them. But it cannot become an exclusive possession of Judaism, which is what Israel pretends. And I think that's the only compromise. But the idea of dividing bits of it up and saying this is for Israel, this is for the Palestinians is ludicrous, because in fact it's a unified place. There are divisions within it now, but they're all racial divisions. And I think in order to get beyond that, I think you have to recognize that it's a multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual, multi-historical city with a special role to play, and it cannot be that of an exclusive capital for Israel. That's completely ridiculous, unacceptable to the world.
Now, keeping the Holocaust in mind, do you acknowledge the right of the Jewish people to political sovereignty?
Look, the idea of political sovereignty is a very difficult one to deal with. In principle, I have nothing against political sovereignty for a people, but it can't be achieved at the expense of another people. You can't. What Israel has done when it was created in 1948 was to destroy Palestinian society and say, this is our place. We kick out 2/3 of the population, which is what happened in 1948, and the sovereignty is exclusively ours, even in the peace process. They wanted sovereignty over the West Bank and Gaza as well. You can't do that when there's another people. So I say self-determination for all the people there. In effect, two people, the Arab Palestinians and the Israeli Jews. That's the only basis that I recognize for sovereignty, that it can be shared and where there's equality. But I cannot tolerate the notion, nor will I ever accept the idea that in my own country I am designated as an inferior other with less rights than a Jew who has all the rights and sovereignty. That's the basis of Israel today. And that's why I advocate a binational state where there is sovereignty for two people.
But can Palestinians and Israelis really coexist peacefully together?
They have to. The place is very small. Demographers calculate that by the year 2010, in historical Palestine itself, there will be equal numbers of Arabs and Jews. As I said, it's a tiny place. You can't have two people living together on the basis of one dominating the other, because you have the violence, you have the instability and unrest that you have today. And above all, you have the inequality. So I say that coexistence is the only option. I think neither people wants it now. You see, Palestinians would like Israelis to disappear, and I know that Israelis feel the same thing about Palestinians, that they're kind of a nuisance, let's get rid of them, or wish they weren't there, let's close. These are not realistic options, because they're there. And so I think the need for coexistence is absolutely crucial, so long as there's a fair basis for it. I mean, if you're going to have coexistence based on the sovereignty of one people over another, where the other is recognized as an inferior without rights, which is what apartheid was, then you can't have coexistence.
Mr. Sayed, it's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.